TGCRequiem, we're here with some more Dredge. This doesn't really seem like a good hand. Not really any way to get anything kick-started. I suppose you could just kind of plan to discard. You know, draw to 7 and then discard, but I feel like, you know, you're really at a risk of like a Thoughtseize wrecking that plan. So we're gonna mulligan here. I mean, this is okay. At least we get a scry. If we hit Cathartic Reunion, we have a pretty powerful start. So I think this is keepable at 6. Faithless Looting on top is even better. Got a little bit of a bigger graveyard for the Dredge here. Again, I had a poll online on my Twitter feed to pick a deck for me to play. I was supposed to try and play it last weekend, but I just didn't end up having enough time. But Dredge, technically it tied, but it was the first one to the winning vote total, and so it was the deck that was chosen for this video. Have to assume the Cathartic Reunion's going, but again, we luckily drew. No, we have a Faithless Looting coming off the top, so looks like maybe we're playing like a Grixis Shadow deck. And then we're going to go ahead and get Bloodghast and Stinkweed. Again, we could be wrong, you know, it's possible this is like blue-black fairies. I mean, it could be any number of things, but odds are Grixis Shadow. Alright, so pretty strong odds now. If it wasn't already, it's looking pretty likely. If the opponent puts themselves down to under 10, that Bloodghast is going to all of a sudden be hasty. Then again, they may be, you know, in a position to just throw down a Death Shadow right off the bat anyway. Maybe we'll get lucky and be able to Dark Blast if he's, if our opponent rather. I'm assuming it's a he for with the name Raymond. But if the opponent plays a 1/1 Shadow, you know, the odds of them having a 3rd Street Wraith are a bit unlikely. And but they know we have a Dark Blast, so it would be wise for them to not cast into that. Opponent put 1 card on the bottom, 1 on top. If they miss a land drop, I gotta assume that that next card is a land. So we can return 2 Bloodghasts. And then we can cast Life from the Loam. We still have a Stinkweed to Dredge next turn. I think I like that. It's possible we should have played Gemstone Mine there. But I want to make sure that we're not running out of mana for these Stinkweed Imps. Alright, so we have Hasty Bloodghast now, but I have to feel like that means we have at least 1 Death Shadow coming down, possibly a Shadow and a Tasigur. Just going to make the Bloodghast pretty weak, but again, Stinkweed should be pretty good in that. Especially considering our opponent is stuck on 2 mana, which means if they have Fatal Push, Stinkweed requires them to have another land, which we know at the moment they don't. So Bloodghasts are pretty much dead draws at this point. Before we get into our gemstone mines, we're going to just kind of thin out a little bit here. And we'll gladly trade these stinkweeds all day. Have to assume the opponent's plan a couple terminates in the main as well, so it's possible stinkweed dies beforehand, but we can chump with Dark Amoeba and kind of continue casting stinkweeds for a bit here. We also have Life from the Loam to dredge. But really the plan right now is just to kind of black with stinkweed, dredge it. Black with stinkweed, dredge it. Chip in with some damage in the meantime. It makes it a little difficult for the opponent too, because they can't really get through stinkweed without turning on dredge, and dredge, you know, potentially, if they start getting aggressive, threatens them with like a conflagrate hitting the graveyard. So, you know, then we only need to chip in 3 points of damage to throw a conflagrate for lethal if the opponent's tapped out. So this kind of just plays to us. And there's our conflagrate. So I think here we're good to attack with everything because we have land to re-trigger these Bloodghasts. We're going to cast a second Stinkweed. We may want to just keep the Stinkweed back. I guess it's free blocks. No, because they can't block. So actually, yeah, we're just going to attack with the Dark Amoeba here. Fine, we're glad to have them waste a Fatal Push there. Do we have any dredgers left? We don't have any dredgers left. Oh no, we do have a Life from the Loam. So yeah, I think we're good to just kind of keep on how we're doing this here. Throw a second Stinkweed down, makes it very difficult for them to attack. We can also Dark Blast to just to get another Dredger in if we needed to. I don't think we're going to need to, however. Now, there's some risk that the opponent's playing Teamer Battle Rage. It's not very popular in the Grixis Shadow builds, but sometimes they play one or so. Alright, and the opponent just concedes. They don't really see how they're going to get through the Stinkweed. And so we get a win there. And I think we were on the play there? Draw? Draw. So we were on the draw that game. Alright, so Grixis Shadow, I think Leyline's good. Similar effect to Esper. Not quite as good as it is against Esper, but still pretty darn good. Again, Abrupt Decays can be alright. I think what we did before was maybe 2 Abrupt Decay, 1 Ancient Grudge. And again, just because Abrupt Decay is a little better against Shadow. We don't need Collective Brutality. I think we ended up taking out a deck, more Salvage. I think we took out 1 Conflagrate. I mean, I really like the same sort of sideboarding here. The Dark Blasts are not necessary. And then I think, was it 1 Cathartic Reunion, just to kind of hopefully avoid getting blown out too hard off of a Stubborn Denial. Now for Leyline of the Void, just because this shuts down their Gurmag Anglers and Tassigers, they have to have a very Death Shadowy hand to do good with that. 2 land. Looting's okay, but with looting's better if you have a Dredger, and we don't have any Dredgers, so I think we're actually going to mulligan this here. Narcomoeba, I don't want to say is dead in hand. Alright, so this is pretty good. The Leyline, again, very strong, I think. Very limited experience. We do have access to 2 of these. If we get a Thoughtseize on our Faithless Looting, that's a bit of a bummer. I'm going to keep that on top. Even though we need a second land, the hope is to Faithless Looting it away. So I would definitely expect to see a Thoughtseize if they have one. Almost certainly going after the Faithless Looting here. This hand is a little too full of answers, so we may have some problems. Especially now having that Stinkweed Imp on top. Just need to draw some land. Opponent actually, with this keep and kind of the ability to snag that Faithless Looting, the opponent very well could get an early Shadow here and just run away with this. Opponent put both cards on the bottom. Insolent Neonate, pretty good here. This is going to allow us to drop Stinkweed and start dredging. And that may be enough. Also, I can get chip damage in. We certainly still need a second land at some point. And then exiles a couple cards. Nothing of note. So the opponent's going to rip all of our Faithless Lootings with Surgical Extraction. Probably allows them to cast a Shadow. And per usual, forgetting to keep the match tracker up to date. We're up 1-0 in the current match. Yeah, so I'm just going to draw here. Just try and get that second land if possible. Kind of not under any pressure. They can't even flash in Snapcaster to block Insolent Neonate because of Menace. Manners are for mortals. And at any point we can just discard the Stinkweed and try and dredge with it off of the sacrifice on Insolent Neonate. So if our opponent ever kind of puts any pressure on the graveyard, but in the meantime we're just going to try and draw that second land, I think, here. If we get up to enough lands, we can also just or not enough lands, but if we get enough cards, we can just start pitching Stinkweeds or Bloodghasts. Opponent's trying to thin their deck, maybe trying to get to 6 lands on the battlefield so they can hardcast a Tasigur. Alright, so what we can consider here is actually discarding Bloodghast and then playing the land, but I don't think we quite are there yet. I mean, the reason we would do that is we get 2 points of damage versus the 1 from Insolent Neonate. Again, I just don't think we're in a position to need to do that. We now have access to Ancient Grudge if our opponent were to play any Heal Spellbomb or anything like that. They've already shown Surgical Extraction though, so it's quite possible they're not playing the Heal Spellbomb. Pretty unlikely they're playing Grafdigger's Cage with Snapcaster Mage in their deck. Look at this, hard casting Tasigur. They get there. Unfortunately, Tasigur on its own is unable sorry, I got a little bug flying in front of my face. Is the opponent going to have another surgical extraction on the Stinkweed Imp here? The angered, yeah. Alright, so we lose the Stinkweed. Well, that's a bummer. Now, on the plus side, we do get to just draw an extra card. The opponent does know all of these cards in hand. But on the plus side, I think the opponent's surgical extractions are likely gone. Now it's possible they miss. Oh, they missed. They missed the other one. So, unfortunately, this is a part of the game. It's on the opponent to know that they need to get the cards out of the graveyard. In this case, they failed to. We actually could just conflagrate here for the win. It's a little risky though. Again, our opponent could have a counter and shut it down, so I'd rather just life from the loam to try and get the cards. If they counter it, you know, we're still okay. We play a land for turn. I guess we'll play the Blackcleave Cliffs. Always make sure when you surgical extract that you always take the cards out of their graveyard as well. So you read surgical extraction, and the opponent just scoops. So surgical extraction allows you to choose a target card in graveyard other than basic land, search its owner's graveyard, hand, and library for any number of cards with the same name as that card, and exile them. So basically the opponent looked through our hand, took out our Stinkweed Imp, they looked through our library, took out the Stinkweed Imps, but left the one in the graveyard, and because they didn't grab that one, that allowed us to dredge and win the game. You know, it's easy to say it was an accident from the opponent, but it's you know, their responsibility to do that, and if they fail to, you know, it can be an intentional thing. They're not required to do it. So anywho, unfortunate for our opponent, good for us. On the left hand side, if you want to watch the next video in the league, you can do that. In the center you can subscribe, and on the right there's a link to the playlist for Dredge, which right now only have this league, but in the future may have multiple leagues with this deck. So we're off to a 2-0, 4-0 start against Shadow. Seems like the Dredge deck is pretty good against Shadow. Enjoy.